It's not the crime that terrifies Mexico's most dangerous men anymore. It's the punishment. A new prison has risen on the borderlands, a place so unforgiving that cartel bosses, once feared across entire cities, now dread its gates more than rival gunfire.
Anarchy.
Inside these walls, survival is stripped to its bare minimum. Cells barely larger than closets. No contact with the outside world. No mercy for status or reputation. This isn't a correctional facility. It's a slow erasure of human identity.
Pretty much caged animals. They'll lock you up and throw away the key.
La Mesa wasn't always like this. Once nicknamed El Pueblito, the little town, it was notorious for being a world run by prisoners themselves. Stores, makeshift restaurants, even brothels flourished inside. The cartels did business as usual, turning prison time into just another chapter of their empire.
Brought the bear for me.
But when director Cesar Daniel Ramirez Achedo took command in 2014, everything changed. Under his leadership, La Mesa became the government's tool to crush cartel influence, not by reform but by suffocating control. Now the top cartel lieutenants, once men of immense power, are entombed in isolation wings where silence gnaws at them day and night. No phone calls, no visitors, no chance to command their armies, just the echo of their own decline. La Mesa today is less a prison and more a machine, one designed to dismantle men piece by piece until nothing remains but the sentence. Why would Mexico decide to harden its prisons now at this moment? The official answer is justice. But many believe there's more beneath the surface, a mix of revenge, control, and political theater. To understand it, you have to look back at where the story begins. Tijuana, a city of contradictions. Neon lights, nightclubs, and beaches on one side. Cartel turf wars, assassinations, and desperation on the other. Perched just across the US border, it's both a gateway and a graveyard. Drugs flow north, weapons pour south, and when the fallout hits, the bodies and the broken end up in La Mesa. At the center of this chaos stands the prison's newest creation, Section 6. Not just another block, but an experiment in total isolation. The men inside once commanded armies, ordered executions, and controlled neighborhoods. Now they live in cells barely larger than coffins. No sunlight, no soap, no paper. Mold creeps across concrete like a living thing, and the air itself feels like punishment.
Sink where we wash our hands. The toilet over here. Right now, as you can see, the water is off, and it comes on only for like a few hours a day.
But here's the twist. The guards don't truly run this place. Power still answers to the cartels. Orders, money, and threats spill through the bars. Guards who resist often pay with their lives. La Mesa isn't just a prison. It's a battleground inside the walls. Rival factions are placed side by side, forced into uneasy proximity, long enough to fester but never resolve. The result? Tension that always boils over. Riots erupt like storms, leaving blood across the floors. One notorious night still echoes. 14 inmates butchered, the cartel leader decapitated, his head used in a grotesque game meant to send a message. And yet, instead of loosening its grip after the violence, Mexico doubled down. More restrictions, more isolation. The question lingers, is this about protecting society or simply crushing men until nothing remains? For years, the cartels controlled Mexico's streets, and with money and threats, they stretched their reach into police forces, courthouses, and even politics. Now the government is fighting back in the only arena left, the prisons themselves. Strip the leaders of their influence, cut them off, break them. But there's a dark consequence. Not everyone inside these walls belongs to a cartel. Some are caught in the crossfire. Take the case of an American veteran, accused not of running drugs, but of stealing a car. His punishment? 9 years inside a place described not as a correctional facility, but as psychological torture.
The misuse here is terrible. The living conditions here is terrible.
Isolation here is absolute. English speakers say they can't communicate with anyone around them. No interpreters, no visits, no voices from home. A sentence becomes a disappearance. And when sickness strikes, survival depends not on medicine, but on luck. Inmates whisper of men dying in their cells, untreated, forgotten. This leads to a haunting question. Is Mexico truly reforming its justice system, or burying its failures under layers of concrete and silence? Later we'll return to the prison's past, when La Mesa was called El Pueblito, the little town. A place where inmates ran stores, clubs, even brothels. A twisted community that thrived behind bars. Because what's more terrifying? A prison ruled by criminals, or a prison ruled by silence? When the state declared war on La Mesa 2002 marked a turning point. What happened at La Mesa wasn't simply a prison renovation, it was a declaration. The Mexican government bulldozed the inmate-run shops, shut down the clubs, and tore apart the little city that Cartels had built inside the walls. The message was clear. From now on, the state would decide who held power. But power doesn't disappear, it adapts. And inside La Mesa, it shifted into a new shape. Tighter surveillance, shorter time outdoors, and constant monitoring of every movement down to the second.
Nowadays, we have a huge number of rules to increase security. They enable us to keep perfect control.
Each morning begins with raids. Guards combing cells for makeshift knives, contraband, or even small luxuries turned into weapons. Fans twisted into heating coils. Toothbrushes shaved into blades. Anything that could tilt the balance. But violence didn't vanish with the old system. It went underground. Inside these walls, survival means battling for the most basic needs: air, water, a moment to wash. One inmate described his former life of wealth and women, only to contrast it with fighting over a shower. In La Mesa, comfort doesn't exist, just scarcity.
I didn't know what it was like to go hungry, as I could always afford to buy everything.
And then there's Dolores Sanchez. She's seen both sides of La Mesa. In the late 1990s, she could run her own small shop inside, hire staff, and walk freely. Today, she delivers medicine under constant guard, stripped of the twisted freedom that once existed under cartel rule. It sounds like progress. No drugs, no alcohol, no open corruption. But that order carries a price. Minds slowly unraveling, bodies neglected, hope extinguished. Every step in the prison is choreographed like a dance. Cells open one at a time. Prisoners are marched in strict sequences so rivals never cross paths. Guards call it order. Psychologists call it paranoia. 2 hours of sun a week is considered a privilege. Most inmates spend nearly every hour of every day sealed away. For some, the damage is unbearable. They don't beg for release, and they beg for transfer, anywhere but here. Men like Abraham Chavez Orozco, arrested young for smuggling, now serving his sentence in near total deprivation. No privacy, no proper hygiene, no medical relief. Just heat, hunger, and endless waiting.
Everything's dirty. Just sitting on the toilet is horrendous.
La Mesa's design ensures that inmates may spend over a decade interacting with only a handful of people, guards with batons and fellow prisoners who may just as easily slit their throats. That isn't rehabilitation. That's slow-motion destruction. A mother's plea for mercy falls on deaf ears. She doesn't ask for her son's release, only for transfer to a place less crushing, less poisonous to the mind. But inside La Mesa, hope itself feels like contraband. Because this place doesn't just hold cartel executioners. It cages the poor, the forgotten, the foreign, and sometimes the unlucky. For some, the sentence is less about serving time and more about being buried alive with a television set for company. And then there's the hole, the ultimate punishment within punishment. A block of concrete where light struggles to enter and even guards hesitate to step inside. Prisoners call it the end of the line. Mold crawls across damp walls. The air is heavy, stagnant, sour. There's no water, no electricity, and no clear release date. Some men emerge after weeks. Others never come back. What earns a trip to the hole? Not murder, not riots. Sometimes it's as trivial as answering back to a guard or hiding a scrap of food. The director once boasted that La Mesa had gone from chaos to control, and control is exactly what defines it now. Not reform, not rehabilitation, just control. The kind that turns men into files, into units, into shadows. But here's the dangerous irony. When you strip away identity, when you squeeze every ounce of humanity into silence, you don't stop violence, you create it. Up next, we'll pull back the curtain on how this system really works. From the hitmen who describe guards working hand in hand with cartels, to the hidden murders that go unnoticed behind bars. There are riots, and then there are massacres so grotesque they scar a nation. One clash inside La Mesa ended with cartel members tossing around a severed head like a ball. That single night revealed a truth the government doesn't want spoken. Even when locked in cages, cartel bosses can wield more power than the state itself. Because in Mexico's most feared prisons, solitary confinement doesn't end control. Sometimes it strengthens it. This is the hidden war inside La Mesa, not only between the state and its prisoners, but between rival cartels who treat prison wings as territory to be conquered. Violence doesn't stop at the gates. It mutates, adapts, thrives. It's a reminder that inside La Mesa, the locks may belong to the government, but the fear, the real power, still belongs to the cartels. Think about that for a moment. Inside La Mesa, justice comes in two forms. The one printed in law books, and the one carved into flesh. That's why the government clings to control with such desperation. Director Acavdo designed the new La Mesa as a fortress where enemies are kept apart not by chance but by precision. In Section 6, rival cartel members are never allowed to cross paths. Yard time is rationed to just a couple hours a week, and even that is tightly supervised. Break the rules and you vanish into solitary. But don't mistake solitary for safety. Survivors describe it as a coffin with mold, a place where water drips from rusted pipes, food is scarce, and the air feels like it's closing in. Some say guards forget they're even in there. And yet, despite this iron grip, the cartels still flourish. Their weapons aren't chainsaws or rifles anymore. It's fear, bribery, and a network so efficient it makes the state look clumsy. La Mesa might look like steel and concrete from the outside, but corruption seeps through every crack. Even foreign inmates know it. Take Taylor Elliott Howard, a U.S. Marine turned prisoner. He doesn't speak Spanish, guards don't speak English, there's no translator, no outreach, and no concern. Isolation for him isn't just physical, it's total abandonment.
They don't understand any English, they don't try to have any interpreters or anything like that, so as far as us, we're in trouble.
Inside La Mesa, survival isn't about serving your sentence. It's about enduring a system that seems designed to forget you exist. Perhaps the most disturbing part of Mexico's new prison strategy isn't the cells or the guards. It's the design of the mind games. This is deliberate psychological breakdown. Remove language and you strip away power. Remove sunlight and time itself dissolves. Remove human contact and identity collapses. It's no longer about punishment, it's about erasure. La Mesa's past shows how far things have shifted. Before the reforms of 2002, the prison resembled a bizarre marketplace where cartel leaders lived in excess while the poor withered away. Inside its walls, there were restaurants, bars, even brothels, all built and operated by inmates themselves. Guards barely existed. The cartels were the law. But the government's fix wasn't balance, it was suffocation. In place of a cartel city, they built a machine of isolation so strict that everyone, kingpin or car thief, gets crushed by it. And the cost? Neglect. Medical care is nearly non-existent. One inmate recalled 9 men dying in just a single block, not across the prison, but on one tier. Illness isn't treated, it's ignored.
I've had a foot infection in the past. The food is bad and unhygienic.
Even basic survival depends on family. No money from outside means no soap, no toothpaste, not even a toothbrush. Water is rationed. Hygiene is a privilege. Some inmates resign themselves to decay, whispering that if they die here, let the dogs eat me. But not everyone stays buried. One former cartel hitman reached his breaking point. After years of serving as an enforcer protected and feared, he discovered the truth. Even the killers are disposable. Beaten, tortured, betrayed, he was cast aside by the very cartel he defended. And so he did the unthinkable. He walked away. Today, instead of pulling a trigger, he wraps fists in gloves. A boxing coach now, he teaches kids how to fight. Not the way he once did, but to give them a chance at a different life. Because every man who walks into La Mesa already knows the truth. There is no redemption waiting for him there. No forgiveness. Only a slow, invisible death of everything that makes you human. And yet, Mexico keeps building more places like it. Steel and concrete fortresses where lives are monitored down to the second, but nothing is ever healed. Where the real question isn't who they're locking away, but who they're willing to let rot. Here's the part that should keep you up at night. These are just the ones who got caught. The true story doesn't end inside the prison walls. It spills into the neighborhoods of Tijuana, where children are turned into lookouts before they can even drive, where cartel bosses still direct business as usual, and where violence bleeds through every street corner. La Mesa is only one spoke on a much larger wheel, a wheel that keeps turning no matter how many cells the government fills. Because the hardest truth is this: La Mesa isn't the cure, it's the symptom, a showcase of control that masks a war the state is still losing. The real battlefield has always been outside, in the streets that feed the prison, in the homes where cartels recruit, and in the silence of communities too afraid to resist. We've traced La Mesa's transformation, from a cartel-run marketplace to a state-controlled machine of isolation. We've shown how power never disappears, it only changes form. And we've seen what happens to those caught in the middle, abandoned, voiceless, erased. The walls of La Mesa may hold bodies, but they don't hold the truth. That truth lives outside, where the war never ends. In Tijuana's neighborhoods, childhood looks different. Radios replace toys, not for play, but for lookout duty. Armored SUVs cruise the streets, not driven by police, but by cartel lieutenants. And murder? It's not a shock, it's business. The economy runs on violence, and the prisons are only its reflection. As La Mesa's own director admitted, what happens outside the walls happens inside. The prison is simply the mirror. So how did it come to this? How did a border town once known for tequila, nightlife, and tourism descend into a murder capital? And how did La Mesa transform into its graveyard? To answer that, you have to follow the pipeline of violence before the arrests, before the convictions. It begins with the children, recruited young, some as early as 9. Their job is simple: watch the police, carry notes, pass along weapons. If they fail, they vanish. If they succeed, they move up. By 12, some of these kids become enforcers, faster than their peers can finish middle school. And don't think this happens only in forgotten rural towns. Tijuana is the most trafficked border crossing on Earth. That makes it the most valuable square of smuggling real estate on the planet. Guns flow in from the US. Drugs flow north in return. The bodies left in between, cartel or civilian, are just part of the cost. Messages carved in bloodwork. Entire neighborhoods fall silent. Parents scrape together what little they have to send their children far away. Police chiefs stop speaking. Politicians bend or break. Institutions collapse. And when the killers responsible are finally captured, they're sent to La Mesa, not to be rehabilitated but to wither. Yet even there, behind reinforced walls, they still command orders for hits, control of smuggling routes, extortion of guards. Not because the system failed, but because the system was already compromised.
The more corrupt, the better for me.
And so the cycle grinds on. Outside, fear becomes law. Inside, isolation replaces hope. Somewhere in the middle, Mexico's war on drugs transforms into something darker, a war against its own citizens. Even inmates see the paradox. Dolores, who has lived more than 2 decades behind bars, remembers both versions of La Mesa. Once she moved freely in a cartel-run village inside the walls. Now she works as a nurse under strict state control. But when asked which version she preferred, she couldn't choose.
In those days, there were no rules. No one said you can't assault anyone, you can't take drugs or alcohol, you can't prostitute yourself, or anything like that.
For Americans like Taylor Elliott Howard, the contrast is equally devastating. Decorated in Iraq, stripped of identity in Tijuana. He can't afford soap or toilet paper unless he barters handmade jewelry for it. A Marine once praised as a hero, now reduced to a foreigner trading trinkets for hygiene.
The misuse here is terrible. The living conditions here is terrible. I'm a combat veteran. I'm a United States Marine. I've served in the Iraqi war. I'm decorated. Over there, I'm a hero. Over here, I'm a villain.
The government insists this is about control. But the question lingers, at what price? Because when you starve a man of dignity, water, and voice, you don't just weaken him, you remake him. And when thousands of those men are eventually released back into society, harder, angrier, more broken than before, what exactly is Mexico unleashing? We asked a former cartel soldier if he felt regret. His answer was chilling. He mourned the pain he caused his family, but not the lives he had taken. That isn't rehabilitation, that's indoctrination. And inside Mexico's harshest prisons, men aren't only contained, they're remade, not into citizens, into something darker, all under the banner of order. Because the truth is, La Mesa didn't invent this violence, it inherited it. The bloodshed was imported from fractured homes, failed schools, and communities abandoned long before the first crime. By the time someone lands in a cell, they've already survived a harsher system, poverty. And in Mexico, poverty isn't just a struggle. It's a weapon cartels use better than the state ever has. Cartels offer what the government never provided: money, respect, and a sense of belonging. One ex-soldier admitted that most of the people he knew never finished elementary school. That wasn't random. It was part of the design. When education collapses, when jobs dry up, when violence becomes part of daily life, the cartel looks less like a gang and more like the only ladder out. But can that ladder ever lead anywhere good? The music, the TV shows, the neighborhood legends, they glamorize a life most of these kids don't truly understand. By the time they realize the cost, it's too late. So what about La Mesa? It was meant to be the solution. But instead of breaking the cycle, it became another link in the chain. Inside its walls, men are stripped not just of freedom, but of humanity. Families cut off, language barriers ignored, support systems destroyed. Water is rationed to a trickle. 5 men might share a single bed. Others sleep on top of toilets. And the guards? They're prisoners of another kind, forced to choose between loyalty to their job or the safety of their families. Many learn quickly who to obey and who to leave alone.
When I think about where I work, the first thing that comes to mind is that it's a huge challenge. It's definitely very challenging.
Inside La Mesa, survival isn't just about the inmates. It's about everyone who steps through the gates. What happens when someone dares to push back against the system? When a man who once lived by cartel law decides to walk away? You might expect redemption. But in La Mesa, breaking free doesn't mean safety. It means survival against impossible odds. That is the reality of Mexico's extreme prisons. Not rehabilitation, not stability, just chaos in a cage. And when men do serve out their sentences, what kind of life waits for them outside? Take Francisco, once a cartel killer, now 7 years behind bars. His family vanished from his life. He fears his children have slipped into the same world he once ruled. All he has left is a fading photograph he stares at each morning, clinging to memories of a family he no longer knows.
I look at this photo every morning.
Then there's Abraham, only 22 when he was arrested for running drugs. He pleads for transfer to another prison, desperate for even a sliver of relief. In La Mesa, hope itself feels like contraband. No sunlight, suffocating heat. 3 years without a single embrace from his sister. His crime wasn't power or violence. It was youth, poverty, and being expendable.
There are some family members and friends who I haven't seen for 3 years. Like my sisters, for example.
Because here, thinking too much is dangerous. In a place like La Mesa, hope doesn't just fade, it gets you killed. It raises the question, if prisons like La Mesa create more broken men than they reform, why does Mexico keep expanding them? The answer lies in appearances. To the public, they are symbols of authority, proof the government is in control. To the cartels, they're obstacles, not endings. And to the inmates, they're not institutions of justice. They're reminders that you are no longer a person, just a problem. And problems aren't fixed. They're buried. But here's the twist no one sees coming. Some inmates, after years in this concrete purgatory, don't want freedom. For them, the outside world is more frightening than the cell. Outside means chaos, unpredictability, and ghosts of the past. Inside, at least, there's routine. There are rules. There's a price they already know how to pay. And they're not alone. Others, like former cartel gunmen, carry scars that don't fade at the gate. Post-traumatic stress, sleepless nights, emotional numbness. Years of survival behind walls carve them into something unrecognizable, even to themselves. They don't know how to re-enter society, not because of the crime, but because the system itself rewired them. The question isn't whether La Mesa changes people. It's how many return to the outside as strangers to the world and to themselves. So, where does that leave us? We've pulled back the curtain on a prison where sunlight is rationed like medicine. We've shown a city where childhood is stolen by gangs before school ever has a chance. We've revealed how cartel leaders continue to command power from inside concrete cells, and how the state, no matter how hard it presses down, can never quite crush it. But here's the truth. La Mesa isn't the final chapter. It's only the opening scene. Step back for a moment and look beyond the steel gates of La Mesa. What you'll find isn't just a prison. It's part of a machine, political, economic, and global, one that stretches far beyond Tijuana's hills. La Mesa doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's fed by the drug war, powered by corruption, and financed by fear. And at the end of the day, it doesn't just swallow criminals. It swallows families, communities, and futures. Because here's the truth no one says out loud. La Mesa isn't only a place to punish men. It's a stage. When a politician stands in front of La Mesa's walls, he isn't talking to the inmates. He's talking to voters. The message is simple. We are in control. For the public, these prisons are symbols of safety, proof that the government is cracking down on cartels. During election cycles, leaders showcase them like trophies, pointing to the razor wire and guards with rifles as evidence that progress is being made. But is it progress, or is it PR? Think about it. Mexico spends billions building high-security prisons, but homicides still rise. Cartels still flourish. Drugs still cross the border. The violence doesn't disappear. It just relocates, from streets to cell blocks. And La Mesa is the perfect backdrop. Its walls are proof-of-life photos for the government's war on drugs. Never mind that the war is being lost. Never mind that inside, cartel leaders still run operations as if nothing changed. To politicians, optics are more valuable than outcomes. To gain more understanding of La Mesa, you have to look north. Because this prison, like many others in Mexico, is a byproduct of U.S. demand. America consumes the drugs. America smuggles the guns. and Mexico pays the price in blood. Every year, billions of US dollars flow into cartel hands, fueling the very violence La Mesa pretends to contain. Add to that the river of firearms streaming south from US gun shops and trafficking routes, assault rifles, pistols, even grenade launchers. And suddenly prisons like La Mesa aren't just Mexican problems. They're global fallout zones of an international trade. And it's not just economics, it's politics. Washington pressures Mexico to get tough on crime. Mexico responds by locking more people up. But who fills the cells? Not the kingpins, not the financiers. It's the young, the poor, the disposable, men who moved bricks of cocaine or guarded stash houses for pocket change. They become the face of the drug war, while the billionaires behind it stay untouched. La Mesa is unique in its own right, but not the only one out there. It's part of a global pattern. In the US, there's ADX Florence, the Alcatraz of the Rockies, where inmates are kept in near-total isolation. In Colombia, Pablo Escobar built his own luxury prison, La Catedral, before the state had to storm it. In Brazil, Carandiru became infamous for the 1992 massacre, when police killed more than 100 inmates during a riot. What do these places have in common? They're symbols, not solutions. They represent governments flexing muscle, not fixing roots. La Mesa fits neatly into that lineage. Brutality as a substitute for reform. Containment as a substitute for change. Now let's talk money. Because behind every wall at La Mesa is a receipt. Building this prison cost millions. Running it costs even more. Guard salaries, food contracts, medical supplies, maintenance. It all drains government coffers. And here's the brutal irony. One wing of La Mesa costs more to run than dozens of schools. For the price of one prison, you could fund job programs in neighborhoods where cartels recruit. You could build clinics where addiction festers. You could train teachers. But instead, the state doubles down on incarceration. Because prisons are easier to sell to voters than long-term reforms. And make no mistake, incarceration is a business. Every new cell block is a contract. Every catering deal is a kickback. Every security upgrade is a budget line waiting to be skimmed. Contractors profit, politicians profit, officials profit. The cycle of money keeps turning, even while the cycle of violence deepens. But here's the cruelest part. Prisons like La Mesa don't just drain governments, they drain families. Inside, the state provides the bare minimum: a thin mattress, a tray of beans and tortillas, sometimes medical care. Everything else, soap, toothpaste, blankets, medicine, comes from outside, which means mothers, wives, and children keep the system alive. And it doesn't stop with food. Want protection from gangs inside? That costs. Want to avoid beatings? That costs. Want to see your family without harassment? That costs. Every privilege, every small dignity has a price tag. Families already crushed by poverty are bled dry by a system designed to exploit their desperation. This is the hidden economy of La Mesa, not just the billions in government spending, not just the contracts feeding politicians' pockets, but the everyday extortion that forces families to choose between feeding their children or keeping a father alive in prison. And the cycle is merciless. Poverty creates crime. Crime fills prisons. Prisons drain families. Families sink deeper into poverty. And the cartels, they recruit the next generation from those same broken homes. Once again, we ask, why keep building places like La Mesa if they don't work? Because for politicians, prisons are convenient. They're visible, they're dramatic. They send a message. We're doing something. Never mind that what they're doing doesn't solve the problem. And for those who profit, contractors, corrupt officials, even cartels who exploit prison economies, the system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. But step inside La Mesa, and the real cost isn't measured in pesos. It's measured in people. Men locked in cages without sunlight. Families bankrupted by bribes. Communities drained of fathers and sons. A generation of children growing up with hunger and anger as their inheritance. La Mesa doesn't just punish criminals. It punishes the poor. It punishes mothers. It punishes children. And when those children grow up, what choices are left for them? The same choices their fathers made. So when you hear about La Mesa, don't just picture razor wire and gun towers. Picture the bigger machine, the U.S. appetite for drugs, the flow of weapons across the border, the politicians who need prisons for votes, the contractors who cash in on concrete and steel. La Mesa isn't just a prison, it's a mirror. It shows us what happens when politics replaces justice, when business replaces reform, and when poverty is criminalized instead of cured. And until those roots are addressed, until governments invest in schools instead of cells, jobs instead of guards, rehab instead of razor wire, La Mesa won't be the last prison like this. It will just be another link in a chain that keeps getting heavier, dragging down the people it was supposed to protect. And that's where we'll leave you. If you found this story eye-opening, explore the other videos in this channel to keep uncovering the hidden battles shaping our world.